So as was mentioned, I chair the social development pillar for the community safety wellbeing strategy, and we have come up with a plan to run a social media campaign to increase awareness about homelessness in our community. So just a bit of background information on this topic. In the Kenora District, Dryden has, well, the Kenora District itself has one of the highest rates of homelessness in Ontario. And particularly because of our climate in winter, it tends to be invisible because people need to be indoors during that time, and they don't necessarily have a home, but they're not in the streets per se and visible to those in the community. So they could be couch surfing in jails, hospitals, or other institutions where they're seeking services, or there's many organizations in Dryden that will just open their doors, especially in winter, and let people, be in the lobbies or the hallways or using the washrooms, just giving them a place to come in and warm up and maybe get a warm drink. So obviously being homeless makes employment and a healthy, normal life very difficult to sustain. And we also know that when we ensure that the needs of everyone in our community are met, especially those who are most vulnerable, then we're more likely to have a community that's going to be thriving. So some facts about homelessness in our area. In the 2021 KDSB Homelessness Enumeration, as Henry mentioned when he was here a few weeks ago talking with you, 221 people were identified as homeless in our district, and 37 of those were in Dryden. And Henry also mentioned that you could probably triple that number. It wasn't necessarily a realistic number, it was a point-in-time count. So that means on that day, at that time, when they were doing surveys in our community, that's how many people showed up or participated in doing the survey because they were at an organization who asked them to do it. We also know that there's limited supports in our community for homeless people. We don't have a shelter. There's nothing formal in terms of a warming space or somewhere where people can just spend the night if they need to, or even during the day to go and warm up and use a washroom. It's just out of the goodness of people and organizations who enable that to happen right now. And it's not enough. We know that the bank vestibules are starting to be locked up at night. That's where people tended to spend some time if they needed to, get some shelter. And the overpass walkway was also closed at night recently. And I know that was much debated at council, but it was a decision that was made, and leaving people one less place to find shelter. And then those places during, when people need it during the week, the organizations that open their doors, they're only open Monday to Friday, business hours only, which leaves a huge gap over the weekend for what people do or where they go for any type of support. It likely often leads to police involvement or providing a space for them or emergency. And we know that both of those systems are overwhelmed already, and this just adds to their burden of a problem that shouldn't land at their doorstep. There are other ways to address this. Some additional facts: the annual household income in Dryden is $5,000 less than what the provincial average is. So we know that because of this, it suggests that many households in Dryden have limited budgets that put them at risk for insecure housing or being at risk for homelessness. We also know from what Henry said during his talk that many of the people who are homeless in Dryden or at risk of being homeless, they're families, they have children. And the prospect for those children isn't good if they're at risk for homelessness or experiencing homelessness. It tears families apart, and they're taken away from their parents. So this slide shows the portion of income spent on rent in Dryden for people who actually rent their homes. So 45% of households who rent spend more than 30% of their income on rent and utilities. And 12% of those households spend more than 50% on rent and utilities. So that's a pretty significant portion of renters who whose budgets are being stretched. So you might think of, you know, I think everyone has sort of a stereotypical view of what, you know, a homeless person might be, or where they come from, or why they're in that situation. And given those stats that were on the previous slide, it's, you know, working people who are at risk as well of landing in this situation. People who have an income. So the Community Safety Wellbeing Social Development Pillar Plan has objectives in it that relate to homelessness. Prior to our formal plan being developed last year, the Social Development Pillar had been working quite assertively on trying to advocate for a shelter in Dryden, or at the very least a warming center. And, you know, it was nearly 2 years of us, you know, kind of pounding the pavement, trying to get some movement on the issue, and nothing was happening. So I'm a little sad to say that when we did establish our plan, we kept some advocacy pieces in there in terms of homelessness and supportive housing, but we kind of fell back. We pulled back a little bit to make our objectives more realistic for what we obviously could achieve, as opposed to something that we were not affecting. We have having zero effect in advocacy in Dryden on establishing a shelter. So those objectives turned into, you know, creating more awareness about the need and preparing our community for the time when a shelter would be established, and generating some support and readiness for that. So then we determined that a social media campaign would be, in order to, as a first step, an action item for us that would be doable. We know that in our community there are many challenges around homelessness, and those include stigma about homelessness, mental health and addictions, and about the high rate of Indigenous people who are homeless in our community. And the Homelessness Enumeration reflects that. And we know that there is a high percentage of Indigenous people in our community who are experiencing homelessness related to mental health and addictions and many other reasons. But many assumptions are made about that population as well in terms of why they're in that situation. Nimbyism, for those who don't know, not in my backyardism. People in our community, I think it's safe to say, would generally support solutions around homelessness, but they don't want it happening necessarily in their neighborhood. No, they don't want a shelter, you know, in their neighborhood. You know, there would be some resistance to downtown because they're already experiencing issues with homelessness, you know, impacting what's happening downtown. And so we do anticipate some resistance around that. There's commitment fatigue. We've been working on this for years. Before I came along, you know, and with the social development pillar, I know there's been people who have, you know, been voicing concerns about this, and there's been little funding or progress really to speak of in our community around it. And then the pandemic has also presented challenges to providing solutions. There's a lot of migration to Dryden because people come here from surrounding communities in the north to access services and supports. And again, that sort of enhances or increases that attitude of not in my backyard, and this is obviously somebody else's problem. So that's an attitude that we need to be aware of. And again, pandemic restrictions have made it hard, especially over the past 2 years. The people who are opening up their doors to people to use their washrooms were no longer allowed to do that, or to warm up or access services. So that's enhanced the problem. So our campaign goals that we established were to increase awareness of the issue of homelessness in Dryden, and to start a conversation and maintain that conversation, keep it going until we come to some solutions and answers to this problem. And make sure that it's an informed conversation, that it's not just speculation about why this is happening or how much it's happening or what the answer should be. We want to share the message that this isn't an individual problem, it's a systemic issue. And the whole community needs to engage in the solution to it. There's a lot of individual blame that happens in people's minds, resulting in that stigma, and we want to try to reduce that. And we want to build community readiness and acceptance for a shelter or other supportive housing solutions in our community. We know that it could be a few years before there actually is any form of shelter or supportive housing here in reality. And in the meantime, we want to work on making sure that the attitude within the community is very receptive to that when it's happening. We've seen in surrounding communities where shelters and other forms of supportive housing have been proposed or established even, there has been community resistance, and it's been highly negative and divisive in the community, and that's not something that we want to see happen in Dryden. We want to come together as a community and in a positive way to approach this problem. So some of the strategies that we have come up with are to keep it local and make sure we engage the people who are experiencing homelessness, hear their voice, hear what their experience is, what their needs are, and maybe some of the solutions that they would propose. We want to keep it facts-based, informative, but also maintain a human-centered approach. We want to keep the faces of homelessness relevant in this and the personal experiences. We don't want it to become a population problem that's all about the numbers and the cost of it. We want to reflect on what this looks like for the lives of the people experiencing it. We want to leverage community leaders and local champions and use their voice to promote the messaging that we want to share. And that includes you as Rotary members. Many of you have high profiles in this community, are highly respected, and you have a role to play in helping share this message and creating support. We want to engage media. We're grateful that you're here today. And other community partners in promoting the campaign. And we've chosen a digital approach because it's a low-cost, easy way to share our message, and we don't have a big budget for this. We launched the campaign in November 2021 with the intention of running it for 1 to 2 years, knowing that it was probably going to take at least that long before we saw a shelter come to reality. And at that public launch, it was at Earl's Court outside in November. It wasn't, a particularly warm day. We wanted to sort of have a setting where, this is what life is like for people outside 24/7, not just, an hour of launching a campaign. And we had some stakeholders there, including people who are experiencing homelessness or have in the past. And Shane was there to speak to the issue. And Henry Wall as well, and some faith leaders who also want to provide support in the community. So to develop the campaign, the city and the health unit contributed some funds, some limited funds, to hire a consultant to support the development of the ads and the campaign's social media plan. And immediately after the campaign launch, we started to post these ads, and in November and up till now, the partners that were on the social development pillar posted them through their social media, and a banner was run on CKDR for several months. The city also has a web page devoted to the campaign, and we plan to continue running the ads. I'll just share a few more of them. This is the initial ad that was launched, obviously in winter. And then we carried on sharing further ads. I'll just leave these up for a minute for you to read through. So this would be used, for example, in Facebook. The image would be posted, and then the text in the comment section below around homelessness being invisible. So the ads are designed so that they can be used on many social media platforms, and we sent out a social media kit to all of our partners and asked that they use their social media audience to spread the messages. And more of the ads. So 1% of the population in our region experiences homelessness, which is one of the highest rates in homelessness in Ontario, which was news to me. And particularly more challenging because of the winters that we experience here as opposed to Southern Ontario. And we also know that housing is a first step to changing lives and ensuring that our community thrives. So the next phase of our campaign is a Photovoice Project, and we've just started it. So this is one of the, for those of you who don't know, Photovoice is an evidence-based approach to gathering information about vulnerable populations and sharing their voice through whatever messaging you choose. So we've asked people who are homeless to share their perspectives on what that looks like for them in Dryden, and then they take pictures of what that looks like for them, and we attach their narrative, their story, or the statement they want to make about homelessness in Dryden, and attach it to the picture and create the social media posts, and as well as we're going to develop some posters and other forms of media to share. And we also wanted to make sure that the people who took part in this project, because it's such a personal type of information to be sharing, it takes a lot of courage to share this, that we don't attach their actual names to it, they're fictitious names attached. But all the same, we asked them not to provide anything that would identify them, no faces, no actual places where they live, so that they would be protected. And we wanted to make sure that they were appropriately compensated for sharing this valuable information and part of their life. So they're provided with honorariums for their time and contribution. We try to give them a choice in what they want or need. We can't pay them. We have some rules about that at the health unit in terms of honorariums. We couldn't pay them enough, like an appropriate amount of money for their time through an honorarium. So we've said to them, tell us what you need and we'll go buy it for you and provide it for you. That's ranging from pizza to new boots or shoes, coats, it's clothing often. We're also going to offer rec passes so that they can go in and have a shower. They have a locker, use the washroom, whatever they need to do for a certain amount of time. And maybe that's a one-day pass, it could be a one-month pass, depending on what level of contribution they make to the campaign. So in terms of our partnership with Rotary, we were really excited that Patty and Shane reached out to the Social Development Pillar and asked us to be a part of your efforts in supporting those who are homeless in Dryden. And so our original call to action in our campaign was going to be to ask the community to support the shelter that was being established, as far as we knew, in November. There was a shelter opening in December, and that didn't happen for a few different reasons. And so our call to action fell apart because we couldn't say, donate money to the shelter, or go, spend some time at the shelter and help out, or, donate clothing or bedding or whatever. We had no call to action to our campaign then. We were left just saying, homelessness is a problem, here's why you need to support it. But we didn't say how or what to do about it, which is a huge piece missing from our campaign. So when Patty and Shane came forward and said, we want to do something, we were so glad to be able to say, we have a call to action now. And we are very interested and excited about being able to partner and promote what you're doing in your call to action in the community, and gathering support and monetary and otherwise for those who are homeless, and pulling together the agencies who will help distribute what you manage to collect from the community and develop a plan to distribute that. So we do look forward to working on that with you and are grateful for that opportunity. And if you have any other suggestions about our campaign or comments or questions, feel free to talk about it now or contact me, and we can hopefully expand on our campaign as we go forward and prepare our community for great things to happen, hopefully, and big changes to be made for the people who need it the most.